Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to this episode. I keep calling it an edition when it's an episode. With this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged, I know that everybody is sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of all of the discussion that continues about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's comments about the claim that America is running concentration camps on the southern border where we're detaining migrant children who are unaccompanied, and then we are also detaining other people, families and others that are trying to cross the border illegally. It has finally reached the tipping point where two people that I never expected to say anything about this have said something. And the first one is Nancy Pelosi. And I want you to hear her refusal to condemn Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Holocaust comparison, saying that, well, here's the lesson. Pelosi refuses to condemn the comments. And what she does is she then very deftly and very politically astutely shifts the conversation away from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez back to Donald Trump and his supporters. That is a great lesson for us to learn when we're listening to the mainstream media report on these stories. Take a listen.
So Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is under fire again for some comments she made about concentration camps. I'm wondering if you've talked to some of the freshman members about the power of their words and the use of their social media and what you're thinking of all this back and forth.
These members of Congress they come and represent their district and their point of view.
So I just pause it a moment. If they come to D.C. representing their congressional district's point of view, is Nancy Pelosi saying that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, her comments about running concentration camps in the United States, that represents the views of her congressional district in Queens? I don't think that's what she meant, but clearly that's what she said.
Take responsibility for the statements that they make. I'm not up to date on her most recent one. I saw something in the news, but no, I haven't spoken to her about that. I do have some comments to make to my caucus.
And here comes the shift. Here comes the pivot away from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to Donald Trump. This is, I mean, we just need to recognize that politically, this is a brilliant move.
Writ large about the political nature of how politically charged the atmosphere is. So understand that while the Republicans have no interest in holding the president accountable for his words, they will misrepresent anything that you say just if you have one word in the sentence that they can exploit.
Bam. So she refuses to condemn Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and shifts the entire answer to the question about what do you have to say about her comments, don't you think they're inappropriate, to she represents her district. She says what she says to represent her district. But what we should focus on is the Republicans' unwillingness to take on the words of Donald Trump. Okay, whatever. But then here, when I said that I think that she's going to reach a tipping point, this is the tipping point. Meet the Press's Chuck Todd annihilates Ocasio-Cortez's concentration camps comment and her argument, and he eviscerates all of the other members of the Democrat caucus who have refused to either come out and flatly condemn her comments or who have come out and tried to weasel their way around, yeah, it's not appropriate, but I'm not going to say anything. Listen to Chuck Todd. Now remember, this is Meet the Press. This is on MSNBC. This is the mainstream media. This is why I say this is the tipping point.
Back tonight, I'm obsessed with what's happening at our southern border. You can call our government's detention of migrants many things, depending on how you see it. It's a stain on our nation, maybe, a necessary evil to others, a deal with untenable situation, perhaps. But do you know what you can't call it? Take a listen.
The United States is running concentration camps on our southern border, and that is exactly what they are. They are concentration camps.
That was obviously New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on Instagram. After being criticized, Ocasio-Cortez tried to make a distinction between concentration camps and Nazi death camps, where the industrialized mass slaughter of the Holocaust occurred. Fair enough, but Congresswoman, tens of thousands were also brutalized, tortured, starved, and ultimately died in concentration camps, camps like Dachau. If you want to criticize the shameful treatment of people at our southern border, fine. You'll have plenty of company, but be careful comparing them to Nazi concentration camps, because they're not at all comparable, in the slightest. But here's where it's upsetting as her comment. Some Democrats have been reluctant to condemn her remarks. They don't want to get criticized on Twitter. Fellow New York Congressman Jerry Nadler tweeted in response, "One of the lessons from the Holocaust is never again. We fail to learn that lesson when we don't call out such inhumanity right in front of us." Jerry Nadler surely knows migrant detainment camps are not the same as concentration camps. So why didn't he just say that? Why are we so sheepish calling out people we agree with politically these days? Obviously, this isn't a Democratic Party thing. It's an even bigger problem on the Republican side of the aisle when it comes to President Trump and the reluctance there. Are we really so ensconced in our political bubbles, liberal versus conservative, that we cannot talk about right versus wrong anymore? Some things are bigger than partisanship, or at least they used to be. And in the interim, the crux of what's truly at stake is lost. What is this country going to do about what's happening at the border in this humanitarian crisis? We'll get to that at some point, I guess, after we have this debate.
I have to say, I agree with Chuck Todd. I don't want you to unsubscribe to the podcast, but I've now agreed with Nancy Pelosi, and I've now agreed with Chuck Todd. But here's how I would fine-tune it. It is indeed about what's right and what's wrong. It's about what's right for the country. It's about what's wrong for the country. It's about the right direction of the country versus the wrong direction of the country. That's the debate. That is the serious issue that we're facing. And all Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has done in her desire, and I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that I think one of the reasons that she is even in the news is, one, she's incredibly active and incredibly good, or I should say, to, again, put a fine point on this, I actually think her staff or her people that are behind her are incredibly good at using social media to gain attention. And unfortunately, that's what most of politics is, gaining attention. You want to grab the audience. Just as I want to grab an audience on radio or podcast or whatever else it is, politicians want to gain an audience. They want to gain voters. So all AOC is doing is she is playing to her base. She is playing to an uninformed, ignorant base. And it got so bad with the concentration comments that finally Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Todd had to step in, and to Nancy Pelosi's discredit, she refused to denounce them. To Chuck Todd's credit, he actually did denounce them. Now, he went on to obviously do the same pivot that Nancy Pelosi did and turn the conversation to Trump and his supporters and people who will not condemn certain things that he says. But when I think about things that he says, I can't really find. Now, in the past, sure, I have found things that I think are wrong. But since he's been president, the things that they would tell you are wrong are actually misinterpreted by the mainstream media. So enough about concentration camps. I just wanted you to hear Nancy Pelosi, and I want you to hear Chuck Todd, because while this has now taken up an entire week of the news cycle, the result of that entire week of the news cycle is at least one individual, Chuck Todd on MSNBC, Meet the Press Today, has come out and said, stop it. And I know that some of what we're doing before, and Christian Toto is going to get in here in a little bit, and we're going to do Hollywood and Toto. So hang in, stick with the podcast. We're going to get to some of the fun stuff in a minute, but I really did want to cover some news that broke overnight and late in the day, Thursday, after I'd already recorded the podcast. You might remember that almost a year ago, we witnessed the several weeks-long drama of hearings to confirm Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. While progressive outrage theater transpired on the streets of D.C. and Democrats in the chamber, and they made fools of themselves, there was a very serious crime unfolding behind the scenes. A Democrat aide by the name of Jackson Costco, he was really pissed off about Kavanaugh, so he stole private information about Republican senators and made that public. That's called doxing. Doxing is when you take the private information. For example, if somebody gets pissed off at me about something I say on this podcast, and so they decide to go on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, or they go to the media, they go other places and say, here's Michael Brown's home address, here's where his wife works, here's his wife's cell phone number, here's his cell phone number, here's all the information that you need, and now go use that private information to go camp out on his front yard or to follow his wife to work or do whatever. That's called doxing, D-O-X-X-I-N-G. And that's what Jackson Costco, this Democrat aide, did with private information about Republican senators. He made it public, and now he's going to jail. Now, he is from a family of wealth. His parents did what they could for him. They offered to pay for his stay at a mental health facility, but the prosecutors in this case were intent on sending a message. Over at Politico, Josh Gerstein reports this. Ex-Hassan aide, that's the congresswoman he worked for, is sentenced to 4 years for doxing senators. A former aide to Senator Maggie Hassan, a Democrat from New Hampshire, was sentenced to 4 years in prison Wednesday for hacking Senate computers and releasing personal information online about 5 Republican senators out of anger spurred by their roles in the confirmation hearings for Justice Brett Kavanaugh. U.S. District Court Judge Thomas Hogan said the sentence for Jackson Costco, he's a 27-year-old kid, was needed to send a signal that criminal harassment driven by political motives would be punished severely in an era marked by extreme political polarization. Now, back in April, he pled guilty to 5 felonies. He admitted that after being fired last year from his work as a systems administrator on this IT staff, I guess, he reportedly used a colleague's key to enter the office, install key logging equipment, that stole work and personal email passwords, and downloaded this massive trove of data from the Senate government IT systems. Now, according to Politico, he also acknowledged, after getting pissed off about the Republicans' handling of the nomination of Kavanaugh, he released the home addresses and phone numbers of Lindsey Graham, Orrin Hatch, and Mike Lee. He posted all of that on Wikipedia. After initial press coverage of that doxing, Costco released information about Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Senator Rand Paul. Now, the Daily Caller has also written a really detailed report on Costco and how this all unfolded. And in many ways, we keep hearing about Watergate and how Trump needs to be impeached because this is just like Watergate. Well, what happened here is more like Watergate than anything going on in the White House. The Daily Caller reports, new details emerged in their sentencing memo that made the case of Costco, the Bernie Sanders supporting son of a millionaire San Francisco developer with ties to Senator Dianne Feinstein and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, even more shocking. A second Hassan staffer, who was also friends with Costco, served as his accomplice in exchange for rent money, helped him physically break into the office at night and pilfer internal emails even after he was fired, according to the sentencing memo. Now, the Daily Caller says that after Costco was arrested and a computer was quarantined, the U.S. Capitol Police and Senate employees did not realize that the keylogger devices were plugged in to many of these Senate office computers. The devices continued even after he was fired and even after he no longer has access. The keylogger devices that he put on the computers continued to send every keystroke, including passwords to personal and business accounts, over a Wi-Fi signal that he could access from the public hallway. The prosecutor said that Costco had, quote, self-righteous entitlement and, quote, a belief that he could violate the sanctity of the United States Senate at will and threaten individual senators as he pleased. Now, there's a whole lot more that I could quote here, but you get the gist. It is simply amazing to me that in recent years we have seen people that are actually embedded in government jobs and embedded in the culture that think they're justified in using their knowledge to break the law in order to sabotage Trump and his supporters in the Senate. You know, I personally think he's lucky to have received such a light sentence. According to a report from the Washington Examiner, last fall he was initially facing a sentence of up to 50 years. But this shows, speaking of the political maelstrom that we live in right now, the lengths that opponents of Donald Trump will go to try to bring him or his supporters down. That's Watergate worthy. Not bitching about a special prosecutor, not bitching about a special counsel, Bob Mueller. That's nowhere near Watergate. This is. There have been a lot of stories over the past week or two about, and you've probably seen it on the news, maybe not national news, but certainly the local news, stories about these drag queens. The drag queens that go into public schools and read to Rugrats. And when I say Rugrats, in this case, I'm not talking about teenagers. I'm talking about grade school kids. I'm talking about kids that are in, first, second, third, fourth grade. And I have a real serious problem with that. And the problem I have with it is I don't care how mature you think your first, second, third, fourth, or even fifth grader is, they are not mature. Their brains are still forming, their personalities are still forming, and all of these external factors. And I'm not saying you should put your kid in a bubble and you should isolate him from everything. But as a parent, if you want to raise your child with certain values, that you want them to know that, this over here happens in the world, it's not necessarily good. Your parents disapprove of this, and here's why we disapprove of this, whether that's a religious basis, a moral basis, a legal basis, or you just have a problem with whatever it is. That's your right as a parent. And you know that the second you send your kids to public school, or for that matter, a private school, parochial school, it doesn't make any difference to me, but once they leave the home and they're in a classroom, they are now subject to those kinds of external environmental factors that are going to imprint on their brain, whether you like it or not. I watch my son with his two kids right now. One's now in high school and one is in junior high or whatever they call it. And I watch it, and I watch them. And but for the maturity of my grandson, because of the conversations I have with him, I really worry about what they're learning. And so I grill them. I'm sure they get tired of Grandpoo asking them all the time about, what are you learning? What are you doing? Tell me about what's happening in school, because I want to know. And part of the reason I want to know is I want to have those conversations in front of their parents, so their parents might be able to think about it too. Well, back to the drag queens. Speaking before the Lafayette Board of Control in Louisiana, a drag queen by the name of Dylan Pontiff confirms that the drag queen story hours that we have been seeing in public libraries throughout the country are all about grooming the next generation. Now, I watched this young man. I can't tell how old he is, but I would say he's maybe 30s. He's maybe mid to lower 30s. And he's in front of the Lafayette Library Board of Control in Lafayette, Louisiana, and he's making his pitch for why he thinks it's okay to do this. Now, I've cut out the first half of the audio because in the first half of the audio, he describes the hatred that he receives where people say nasty things about him. They call him names. They just say horrible things to him. I don't approve of that either. If this guy wants to be a drag queen, I don't care. If he's gay or straight, I don't care. But what I do care about is that we are exposing children whose personalities have not yet developed, to an aberration. Now, if you think that that is a cruel statement to state, there are 325 million Americans, whatever the number is. I guess I should actually look up the current population of the United States. But whatever the current population of the United States is, 300 plus million people, I doubt that 1%, I doubt that even 1% are drag queens. So this is, by the very definition, an aberration. And I think aberrations are the kinds of things that you don't try to normalize because it's an aberration. And then if you try to normalize an aberration, and you start normalizing every aberration, as we seem to be doing in our culture, that proves my argument that we no longer have any guardrails. We no longer have anything that says this is right, this is wrong. Here's what he said in the last part of his statement to the Lafayette, Louisiana Library Board of Control after he spent about 2.5 minutes talking about, he's a young gay man and he's been subjected to, taunts and all sorts of epithets. And I don't agree with that. I'm sorry, and I disapprove of that. If he wants to be a drag queen at a strip club, at a men's club, at a drag queen club, on the Vegas Strip, I don't care. But in a public library where there are children, yeah, I'm opposed to that.
It's about me, but I'm here to let you know that this event is something that's going to be very beautiful, and for the children and the people that support it are going to realize that this is going to be the grooming of the next generation.
The grooming of the next generation. I mean, I could be a smartass here and say, what, learning how to properly put on makeup or groom, or, comb your hair or cut your hair or proper way to dress. I don't think that's the grooming he means. We are grooming the next generation to accept as normal aberrations.
Trying to groom the next generation to not see the way that they just did. And just because I said that, you heard the little plure of people behind me. It's disgusting. We are trying to teach people to be tolerable, to be patient, to be loving. And the fact of the matter is that I'm standing right here and there's probably 50 people behind me looking at me with daggers, wishing that I would probably die in a car wreck whenever I leave here. It's truly implorable.
I don't, and that's right, I disagree. I mean, I can see the people in the room, and look, I think the term redneck is often misused, and it's used in the pejorative. I think redneck is actually a term of endearment. I love rednecks. I think rednecks are part of the heart and soul of this country. This group of people in Lafayette, Louisiana, look like a bunch of Louisiana rednecks, and I mean that in a nice way, not a pejorative way. I truly don't think they're sitting there hoping he dies in a car wreck. He is projecting what he thinks about them. He's hoping that the rednecks are the ones that go die in a car wreck. But let's not let all of this get conflated. The issue is whether or not public resources, taxes, this is a public library, this is the Lafayette Library Board of Control in Louisiana, whether or not those resources should be used to host a drag queen, to perform and talk to and read to second, third, or fourth graders. And I say no. Just no. And last but not least, before we get Christian in here to do Hollywood and Toto, I haven't talked about the fact that New York State has passed a law granting driver's licenses to illegal aliens. I haven't talked about it because, well, what's new, right? Everybody's doing that. But here's what I find fascinating. Some upstate New York County clerks are actually taking a stand against this controversial law. Clerks in Erie, Rensselaer, probably mispronounced that, Niagara and Allegheny counties, those county clerks have said they will not be handing out driver's licenses despite the state legislation. Erie County Clerk Michael Kearns said he believes the green light bill, which passed the state Senate 33-29, conflicts with federal policy, and he's ready to go to court with his concerns. He says that in the memo of the bill, they talk about the reason why they're passing this bill is to make sure that people who are here illegally can get to and from work. And he's not putting up with it. I find this fascinating because if you understand the Constitution, the construction, the structure, that's the better word. If you understand the structure of this republic, then you understand that the 50 states are the primary power besides the people. The people hold the ultimate power. But the 50 states, the people have agreed to form 50 states. And in those states, they have granted certain powers to the federal government. So the federal government is a government of limited and enumerated powers. All other power is reserved to the state, and then any other power is reserved to the people. That's why when people talk about term limits, for example, I always say, well, we already have term limits because that's a power that the people have at the ballot box. That's an example of a power that is reserved to the people. When you think about what is happening in New York State, where they're saying it's illegal to hire people in this state if they're not here legally, they can't work here. So if you're telling us to issue driver's licenses so they can go to work, then you are in essence empowering illegal aliens to further break the law, and you are further empowering businesses who hire illegal aliens to break the law, and that conflicts with federal law, that conflicts with what the county's purpose is in issuing driver's licenses in New York, and we're going to refuse to do it, and we're willing to go to court over it. I love that. And the reason I love it is these lower levels of government, where the rubber truly meets the road, are standing up to these other bigger governments, state governments, federal government, and they're giving them the big finger, and they're saying, no, we are not going to do it. It's like the county sheriffs in Colorado who are declaring their counties, or the county commissioners who are declaring their counties sanctuary counties for the Second Amendment and against red flag bills. That's happened with all, I think, maybe all or at least 90% of the sheriffs in New Mexico. They're declaring themselves sanctuary counties in favor of the Second Amendment. This is the power of people. This is the, when you talk about nationalism and you talk about how around the world that people are rising up against the elites, I think these little tiny things that we see in New York, where county clerks are saying, we're not going to do that. Illegal aliens aren't supposed to be able to work. And if we give them driver's licenses, according to your purpose for passing this bill, we're empowering them to go to work, something they're not supposed to be able to do. And with the red flag bills that destroy all sense of due process, that destroy all sense of the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, sheriffs and counties are standing up against that. And I think that is fantastic. I think it is absolutely fantastic. People may not understand the bigger picture, but you do. The bigger picture is that those of us who are sick of the ruling elite that go to state legislatures, that go to Washington, D.C., and start deciding that they know what's better for us than we do, or that they don't give a rat's ass about the Constitution and the limits and the constraints the Constitution puts on them, we care about that, and we're standing up against it. And this little revolt in New York is a great example of that. Hang on. We'll get Christian in here. Hollywood and Toto coming up next. Hey, welcome back, everybody. I've got Christian Toto in the studio, so to speak, via Skype. And Christian has, by the way, it is Hollywood and Toto it's Friday, so now we're going to have some fun after all my serious talk before Christian came in. Although this could get serious when you think about it.
Let's try to keep it fun.
Okay. All right. So be sure and follow Christian on Twitter at Hollywood and Toto and get to his website, hollywoodandtoto.com, T-O-T-O, hollywoodandtoto.com. So usually on Wednesdays or Thursdays, Christian sends me an email and he's got 4 or 5 topics that he wants to talk about, and I look through them. And most of the time, including this time, the number one topic is The View.
Can't help ourselves. We just can't.
We can't. And I think we can't help ourselves because they truly are just freaking insane.
Yeah, I think Joy is really leading the charge. I think she's lapping her colleagues now. I think Whoopi makes sense once every 3 weeks. I think Sunny has a semblance of rationality behind her. Not always, sometimes. Of course, Meghan McCain's rock solid. But Joy, I think there were multiple stories I could have sent you this week, but I think this one's going to be good enough.
Okay, well, it's not to scare anybody off, it's a 6-minute clip, but we've cut it down. I think even cutting it down, we could be still talking about this on Saturday. When Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came out and made her Holocaust statement or concentration camp statement, I talked about it, I think, on Monday or Tuesday. And then Thursday, it came up again. And then today, because Chuck Todd and Nancy Pelosi have now addressed it, I had to talk about it again today. So it's one of these topics that I'm sick of it. But this isn't really about AOC. This is about the View's take on AOC. Just so you know, Christian, earlier in the podcast, I played 2 clips, one from Nancy Pelosi where she was asked about AOC's comments, and she said, well, I haven't heard all of them. You know, these people get elected and they represent and speak for their district, so maybe she's speaking for her district. And she really kind of threw her under the bus. But then she did what I consider to be an excellent political pivot by taking the question about AOC and turning it around and, guess what? Attacking Trump.
Shocking.
It was a brilliant move. And then Chuck Todd on Meet the Press, he just excoriated AOC for these comments and how wrong they were. And then he attacked Democrats like Jerry Nadler for not just coming out and saying you're wrong and instead being kind of Weasley about it. So that's at the beginning of this podcast. So I say all of that simply so you have some context that people right now are thinking, oh, my God, they're going to talk about AOC and the Holocaust again. I'm sick of it. But I'm just trying to encourage people, don't hang up. Don't turn us off, because it's not us. It's not AOC. It's The View.
And also, if there's a crazy person waving their hands at the clouds and shrieking or wearing a tinfoil hat, it's not really a big news story unless it's a really major player. But I think the reaction to these crazed comments is what's really fascinating, from both politicians either ignoring them or cheering them on to the media. You know, I love Twitter because Twitter exposes all the journalists who are rallying to her side. It is unbelievable, but it's happening right there. It's going past our eyeballs on the screen, and it speaks volumes.
That's why I was so shocked by Chuck Todd for saying what he said. So you'll have to go back and listen to the beginning of the podcast and listen to Chuck Todd today.
I think I read a tweet of his, or sort of I get the gist of what Todd said, and he's right. So.
He's absolutely right. Well, are you ready?
I'm so ready I can't stand it.
Is the hand ready to? Is the stop sign ready?
Let me get my fingers ready. All right, my fingers are good.
Here we go.
Well, I don't think you can compare it, but I I think there's a difference between a concentration camp and a death camp. I think that the Germans, and Hitler in particular, elevated what was a traditional concentration camp to a death camp. Concentration camps were used 40 years before the Nazis used them, let's face it. And we have used concentration camps here. We've used them with the Japanese Americans.
I'm sorry, I have to stop there.
Okay.
The internment camps were not concentration camps. Nobody was sent to an oven. Mm-hmm. Nobody was in forced labor. They were provided, although in my study of history, they weren't necessarily the best of facilities, mm-hmm. but they weren't Auschwitz. Oh.
And the key to AOC's comments was she said never again.
Yes.
Which is not, those are not just two words. Those are the two words.
Right.
They call Americans, them internment camps,
those were internment camps.
But they used them in Cuba.
Yeah.
The Cubans
Wait. I'm sorry, I got to stop already. Cuba is a communist country. So the fact that there are concentration camps mm-hmm. in Cuba, in North Korea, in China, in Russia, there's still gulags. What are we? So that makes AOC's comments okay?
When you have an indefensible statement, you got to get creative.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
George Takei was in an internment camp. He said even when they were held prisoner in these internment camps, he was never taken away from his parents. Yeah. This is almost worse than it was.
I'm not saying that what's going on at the border with family separation.
Okay, I got to stop there too. So he says that he was never separated from his family. That totally ignores the fact that we have unaccompanied minor children coming across the border. What are we supposed to? Hey, could we get 2 volunteer parents to come over here?
You look healthy. Come over here. What's your name? Ted? Ted, nice to meet you, Ted. Here's your son.
Here's your son. That's right. You're now responsible.
Call him Daddy.
Ted. Oh, you're a convicted child molester? Never mind. All right. Now Megan's upset. Now we get Meghan McCain.
Okay. As horrific it is. Yeah. But I do think that there is a big difference between being rounded up by Nazis for the intention of being exterminated is a huge difference. And I will say, you have the Auschwitz Museum coming out and condemning this. You have the Jewish Community Relations Council calling this deeply disturbed by the language and urge her to refrain from making the comparison. I, too, agree that you cannot compare anything to the Holocaust. 6 million plus people were exterminated. I understand everyone's emotion, but I think part of the problem for me, when you automatically call President Trump Hitler and you compare anything to the Holocaust, I start tuning out because it's too much hyperbole. Mm-hmm. And I think we should have rational, calm conversations about how horrific it is. We all work together every day.
Then why is she on The View? She's in the wrong place. If she wants a rational conversation, she should walk out of the building and step anywhere into society, anywhere but the View the View studio. It is the worst place for a rational conversation.
And a researched conversation. You can't see. I mean, I know you've watched this. No, you haven't watched this clip, have you?
It's just the audio. The audio is enough.
The look on Sonny and Joy's face is just one of bewilderment. Like, what, Megan? What are you talking about? We don't.
What are facts?
We don't comprehend this.
But when you spend 2+ years calling Trump Hitler, this is the logical progression from that. Because Hitler had concentration camps and he killed 6 million people. So naturally, whatever Trump does, which again was done by Clinton and also by Obama, from what I understand, these particular detention facilities. And there wasn't a lot of Hitler talk during Obama's presidency, unless I missed it. Maybe there was.
I don't think there was.
Our producers' emotions are high. The host's emotions are high. Americans' emotions are high. When you start talking about the Holocaust, when there are real Holocaust survivors here right now saying it is nothing like what happened then, I think that is the problem. And I think specifically with her, when she's doing it on her Instagram story live, which I understand that's how the kids do it. I'm sort of borderlining on still being a kid, I'm 34. But I do think when you're talking about something this serious, do it in a platform that is more serious.
But did you hear what I said? We're really comparing...
I disagree with that. I don't mind that she's sharing it on Instagram. And this is the new age. It's Twitter, it's Instagram, it's Facebook, it's social media. I have no problem with that at all. If you're smart, you've got a message to share. Why not? That's an odd argument, but maybe it's her way of attacking AOC without attacking AOC.
Right, because I actually said earlier that AOC's mastery, or her staff or her political advisors behind her, have mastered the use of social media.
Yeah.
I mean, I would kill to have. Well, I shouldn't say that because OJ's now on Twitter, and he instantly got 750,000 followers. So when I say I would kill to have 750,000 followers, that now has a new meaning. So I need to shut up, and I would like to have 250,000 followers. So I think, but to your point, I don't know what Megan's point was there. Yes, she does it on Instagram, she does it on Twitter, she does it everywhere because that's where her base is.
If Albert Einstein were alive today, maybe he'd be tweeting. Who cares? It's the content of the material. It's not the vessel. It's not the way it's shipped out.
Right. No, you're exactly right.
I heard
the trajectory towards. We're not comparing it to that.
I mean, but we are not.
Maybe I need to back up and make sure people heard that.
Talking about something that's serious. Do it in a platform that is more serious.
But did you hear what I said? We're really comparing the trajectory towards. We're not comparing it to that.
I mean,
we're on a trajectory towards. So now Joy's backing off that they are concentration camps, but we're on a trajectory toward concentration camps.
We'll get there. And Trump's waiting. He's going to wait until his 8th year, his final year in office. He'll be reelected, and in year 8, all bets are off.
Right, because he'll start using FEMA probably in 2023 or so.
Yeah,
and
ish.
FEMA 2023, 23-ish.
Yeah.
And he'll have FEMA start secretly going around the country, creating these gigantic concentration camps. And then at the last moment, maybe the last 6 months of his presidency, he will start rounding up all of his opponents, everybody. He'll get all the election records, everybody that voted against him, and then they'll all be rounded up and put in concentration camps and eventually killed.
What's amazing about Trump is that it's not like he just entered the scene. He's been around since the 80s, and we've seen him. We know him. We got his shtick. He's an egomaniac. He's a dealer. What makes you think that guy is Hitler? I mean, it's just such a weird thing. I don't understand it. And how you could say people illegally crossing the border as opposed to him rounding up random people and forcing them into these I mean, it's so intellectually dumb. I can't imagine. And I think that's why Chuck Todd finally has to stand up, because he's, even all his insane biases, and he's as biased as everyone else, even he at his core looks around and thinks, I can't just stand here and say nothing. I don't know why more people aren't doing that, but that's where we are.
And as I say almost every time we do a View clip, I'm as scared of the fact the audience is sitting there soaking this up as I am these dimwits on the stage espousing this stuff.
I'm afraid there's going to be some applause that's going to make my skin crawl, but you keep going. We're getting into the good stuff, I'm sure.
All right.
we are not exterminating people.
Not yet.
No, we are. I mean, come on.
We're not exterminating people, and Joy says not yet.
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on with that.
I mean, Megan and
a
I
lot
don't
of kids
agree.
died at that border.
Megan and I don't agree
I'm
on
not saying
anything, but
horrific.
we agree on this. I think she went too far comparing what is happening.
Yes.
Another thing that the left is doing now, they're saying that people are dying at the border. People are going from miles and miles and miles under very hard conditions without the proper medical care, without the proper food and water. When they get to the border, they're in a state of dying. And then the U.S. facilities and the doctors swoop in, try to take care of them, and some people then die because they're too sick to be saved. They're turning that into we're killing people at the border. It is staggering. And Joy Behar just reads all the liberal talking points, hasn't given it a second's thought, but she's going to use it, and she's going to say it's happening already. It's amazing.
How do you go – I mean, wouldn't you like to spend, in a really perverted sort of way, a day with Joy to see just like does she get up in the morning and does she go online and does she read the I'm sure she reads the New York Times. Does she read the Wall Street Journal? Does she look at the Drudge Report? Does she do anything?
No. I'm sure she's got like her daily coasts and all those things, and she sucks it up.
Oh.
On the border, which we all know is despicable.
And you have a Jewish family.
My grandfather's Jewish, so yes, maybe I take this personally, but she went too far. But I will say there have been Holocaust survivors that have also come out in support of AOC. There's someone, Adam Klasfeld, who said, he's a reporter, but he said, he tweeted out that the director of the Oregon Jewish Museum and Center for Holocaust Education said that for those criticizing AOC's remarks on U.S. concentration camps, this sworn court declaration from last year is from the director of that organization, and she shares the fears of survivors and testimony.
We can be anecdotal all day long. I mean, Congressman Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey, who has family members in the Holocaust, came out and condemned this.
Well, here's the thing.
So there are people.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, here's Whoopi.
Whoopi, here's the thing. You ready for the thing?
I'm so ready.
All right.
We've been going through this for the last couple of years with this one in the White House, and I'm sure it's not going to stop because some stuff compares in people's minds, and we know that that's crazy.
Yeah.
You know. But right now, we're going to take a turn because we're doing today's Pride Month, FYI.
What?
I love those segues.
What?
She's ostensibly in charge, so she's trying to wrap things up. But she has, of course, nothing. I mean, I think she just said it's crazy to compare him to Hitler. I think that's what she just said. Is that fair to say?
I think that's absolutely fair to say.
But then speak up, Whoopi.
Oh.
Don't just sit on the sidelines.
Oh, good grief. And thus concludes the view on the Michael Brown Unplugged podcast and Hollywood and Toto. That was truly some of the most insane conversation I've heard.
Yeah, I think it was maybe 5 or 10 years ago when anyone evoked the Hitler card, everything shut down. And it wasn't like we want to shut your voice down. It was the message was you have nothing to say. You're not intellectually honest. You don't have any sort of grasp of history. And that's why we'd say, oh, you've kind of gone too far. It's funny. Recently, my boys were talking about Hitler. I don't know how the subject came up. And they didn't really know much about him. They haven't learned it in school. And so I described a little bit of what happened, what he did, the people that were killed. And as I'm describing it to my son, I'm thinking, this is the guy they're saying Trump is like. Like it reminded me of how literally insane. And I don't like to use the word literally because often it's sort of used and it's misused. This is literally an insane line of discussion. Literally. So once you go there, and they've been doing it when Trump first marched on the scene, Sarah Silverman showed up on Conan O'Brien's show in a Nazi uniform tied directly to Trump. So this is not new. They immediately went to the Hitler card, and they can't let it go from their deck.
I have nothing.
You usually have something. So when you have nothing, it's something.
Yeah, because it's I think it's not only demeaning to the Jews and the Poles and everybody else, and it just minimizes the horrific nature of that genocide.
Uh-huh.
But it ignores the fact that there are still concentration camps and death camps in the world, North Korea and China and Cuba, and for that matter, we may have some in Venezuela we don't know about, but they still exist, and people are still being killed. I did a story yesterday or day before about in China, they are still harvesting organs as needed from political prisoners. And they have the transplant hospitals are next to the political prisoner facilities. Camps,
oh, my gosh.
So that, we need a liver? Go find us a liver. And they come in and they execute the person. They take the liver out and do the transplant.
This is the same China that Hollywood loves, that Hollywood kisses up to, that Hollywood will not speak out against in any capacity, that Hollywood edits its films to placate and please the Chinese censors. That China?
Let me double check and get back to you next week. But I do think it's the same China.
Okay. It could be different China.
Yeah, I don't have a globe anymore, and it's probably outdated, but I think there's one China, and I think it's that
I thought so too, but you should double check.
I will.
By the way, I didn't send this to you, but there was a new survey, and I actually wrote about it yesterday at hollywoodandtoto.com. It said that most people ignore celebrities who talk politics. When they recommend a particular candidate, they ignore them. And actually a smaller subset liked it and or responded to it, but double that group said it actually worked in the opposite fashion. So that's what we're dealing with. And I think that the fact that Hollywood plays the Hitler card so regularly, I think that's directly connected to people's lack of respect for that messaging.
And what bothers me about it is it's like playing the race card. It so minimizes it that it becomes meaningless.
Yes.
And the last thing I want is for either racism or genocide or the Holocaust to become immaterial. But that is what they are doing over the long term.
It's amazing. It's just amazing.
Oh, good grief.
Oh, The View. Never stop being The View, please. Don't get any new hosts. Don't change the format. I just love it.
Okay, so I want to go to a story that you sent me. Are we done with? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're good.
I'm so sorry. I did not mean to cut you off. If you were not finished with The View.
No, we're good.
Because I know that you would hold that against me. I know.
I would, but it's sort of ebbing and flowing. There's a natural curve to The View.
Okay.
And I think we're at the end spot.
Okay. All right. So you sent a story that I think your buddy Nick Nolte wrote. It's over on Breitbart.
John Nolte.
Yeah, John Nolte. Nick Nolte. John Nolte. As woke comedies die at the box office, Adam Sandler breaks Netflix record. Tell me about the story.
Yeah, so this is about two things. One, there have been 3 comedies in the last few months that have all done poorly at the box office. Long Shot, Late Night, and Booksmart. They're all about as woke as can be.
Never even heard of them.
Yeah, well, maybe that's why. So 0 for 3, varying qualities. I thought Long Shot was okay. I thought Booksmart was actually good. Yeah. Late Night is really tough to watch.
All right.
But it's a very woke presentation, a lot of empowering speeches, a lot of, slams against the patriarchy. You know the drill. And so now there's articles and think pieces coming out saying, whoa, what's going on with movie comedies? Why haven't we seen a big blockbuster movie comedy? And there's all sorts of kind of lame excuses. And one of them is, well, everyone's watching Netflix. Well, people went out to see Avengers Endgame, so that doesn't exactly wash. But what John Nolte does is he talks about, well, wait a minute. There's a new comedy out there. It just so happens to be on Netflix. It stars Adam Sandler, and it just broke the streaming service's record. I think it was like 30 million views or some crazy high number. And he said, well, what's different about it? Well, it's not woke, and it's not insulting, and it's not political. And you know what? We like Adam Sandler. Now, I've got some issues with some of his movies. I think he's kind of lazy at times, but he's been on the scene for 25 years, maybe more. He doesn't hate us. He doesn't get political. He doesn't rail against X or Y or Z. I have no idea where he votes or how he votes or what he does. He's just a funny guy who tries to make funny movies and occasionally makes us laugh. And people respond to that. And that's why they're watching his new Netflix show. I think it's called Murder Mystery.
Have you watched it?
I haven't yet. It just dropped a couple of days ago, so I'll probably watch it this weekend. It stars Jennifer Aniston. I think Rob Schneider's in there as well.
Yeah.
But Nolte's great because he does make these cultural comparisons that most of Hollywood and most of the Hollywood press completely ignore. And he's right.
So here's why I wanted to talk about the story.
Yeah.
Now, I caught when I was in New Mexico, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, I got some sort of really bad viral infection, had horrible headaches. And so for the last, say, 10 days, I just haven't been at 100%. Just, occasional headaches and just kind of, just not feeling very good. So Tamara is on Netflix a few nights ago. Maybe it was over the weekend. And we watch Murder Mystery.
Oh, you've seen it. Okay.
I've seen it.
Okay. Uh-oh. The headaches came back?
Everything that you said about what John wrote about the movie is correct. I watched it. It was apolitical. There was nothing in there about Trump. There was nothing. Literally nothing that was political that I can recall. But it was the most cheesy, predictable, sometimes ha 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 funny. Not once was it laugh out loud funny. It was, I don't know how to describe it other than it was just, sometimes when you are particularly at home and you're watching something and you're not really engaged in it, so suddenly you find yourself doing other things.
Yes.
Well, I found myself, opening up the laptop, going to the bathroom, going downstairs to find my phone, to check on something, maybe to get on Twitter. I was doing everything while I was half-assed watching this movie because it was, and I feel badly because everything that you just described about the movie is correct. It's everything that we want in terms of no social justice, no wokeness, just comedy. But the sad part is, it was just a cheesy comedy.
The comedy was in scare quotes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, maybe for some people that's enough. The sort of maybe comfort food theater is attractive enough.
Yes. And that would have been the movie that if we had gone to a theater, if we'd gone to AMC or somewhere, Regal, and we had paid what? So we get the senior discount, so $30 for 2 tickets or something, and then another $20. So we spent $50 at the theater. I would have sat there, pissed off that I'd spent $50 watching it, versus the $12.99 or whatever it is I pay for Netflix.
So listen, that's a good argument that there's a different level of expectation of Netflix versus the movies. But I do think the fact that listen, at the end of the day, when a movie like this comes out, we all haven't read the reviews. We're just thinking it's Netflix, it's a comedy, it's got Jennifer Aniston, it's got Adam Sandler. He's a likable fellow. He's made us laugh in the past. We're going to give it a shot.
And all of those things you just mentioned, I think, are exactly why, as Tamara is searching and going through, she goes, oh, let's watch this.
Right. That's the message.
Right. So, and I was like, oh, Jennifer Aniston, Adam Sandler. I mean, this is probably not going to be, I'm not going to be on the floor laughing, but it's going to be entertaining.
Yeah.
And now I actually feel guilty because I can't speak for you, but you and I have bitched about all of these woke movies and all of the politics in them and everything else. And now here comes one that I watch and I'm like, yeah, okay. I guess
you shouldn't feel guilty.
Well, but I would say this. If you're looking for mindless entertainment, that's what it was.
Okay. By the same token, I want to say that, like, if you're a Christian and you want more faith-based movies, you get them. But I think you should expect something beyond just a generic, cheesy, faith-based movie. And I think that Christian movies have gotten better and have gotten richer. And I think that as audience members, we should expect Adam Sandler to be funnier, that he should do a better job. Listen, I love that he's apolitical. I love that he's a nice guy. I interviewed him when he just started his career. He couldn't have been any kinder. Yeah. And I get the sense that he's the same way now. He always has that same group of friends who he works with. So I'm sure he treats them well, respects them, gets them gigs. But he also has to bring it. And, we're living in an age where there's a lot of good content out there. So I hope that he does better stuff. And just a quick note, Adam Sandler has a stand-up comedy special. It debuted on Netflix probably a couple months ago. And the name, maybe 100% Fresh, I think it might be the name. It is very funny.
Okay.
It's a little bit salty in its language. It ends with a tribute to Chris Farley that is wonderful.
Wow.
And it's the best thing he's done in years. So if you do see Murder Mystery and you're kind of nonplussed by it, I highly recommend this. It is funny. It is goofy. It is silly. It's him at his best. And I kind of thought in recent years he's been phoning it in, and maybe this Murder Mystery is part of that phone call. The stand-up special is excellent.
So to your point, I really shouldn't feel guilty because he was delivering something that you and I have complained is not available, and that is a movie that doesn't have an agenda and they're not pushing politics or anything else. So I should be satisfied that it was mindless entertainment. I think my expectations were higher because, okay, you're right. Here's Schneider, or whatever his name is. You've got Aniston, you've got Sandler. So I really kind of expected a kind of a laugh out loud, funny movie. And it was instead, and Christian, I shouldn't bitch about this. It was just mindless entertainment.
There's room for that. It depends on what you're looking for. And I mean, remember in college, I used to watch Gilligan's Island because if I was stressed out,
Yeah.
it was the most mindless entertainment. It was the pure comfort experience where I didn't have to think. I just watched the goofiness. I had probably seen the episode 12 times already, so I knew the plot. So there's content for every occasion, but I do wish he'd try harder, work harder, make better comedies, honestly.
Okay, but you haven't seen it, so let's make it. Let's put an asterisk here.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
You watch it, and then I sincerely want to hear what you think about it after you watch it.
Okay. Any nudity? Any nudity in it?
Jennifer shows her boobs, not totally, but
Side.
she does. Yeah, she dresses up. I remember at one point in the movie, she puts on like a little sundress on the yacht, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, but it was noticeable.
Okay. By the way, we talked about my old pal John Nolte before. One of the current themes that he's been hammering with his reviews and commentary, he says, I miss TNA. And what he's saying is that for most of movie time, you would have very attractive stars. You'd have them to be beautiful. They'd be curvaceous. They maybe kind of show a little bit. It'd be sort of a sexy presentation. And that in our current feminist age, that's been, I don't want to say removed, but often it's underutilized or downplayed. And, as a male in the audience, often that's appealing to us. If the movie's mediocre, but we saw this gorgeous woman, then that's okay. Like when Jason Momoa was in Aquaman, he's a muscular guy. The ladies loved it. Like, that should be okay.
Yeah.
We go to movies to be entertained and maybe distracted and maybe a little bit, hey now. So, but that's often gone.
There's I think it's Amazon. Is it Ron Perlman? Is that the guy's name?
Yeah, I think so. Big odd-looking fellow?
Yes, the big odd-looking fellow. It's called Hand of God. Have you seen that series yet?
I know a little bit about it. He's a judge and kind of a dark character.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we're now binging on that. And to your point there, I even made this comment to Tamara last night. I hope it didn't offend her. But there's a black woman who plays this upscale. What's the right word for a high-end prostitute? What
high-end prostitute?
Yeah, high-end prostitute. Well, anyway, she plays a really interesting character. Her acting is very good. I have no clue what her name is, but she's gorgeous.
Uh-huh.
She's absolutely gorgeous. And when she comes into the scenes and she's doing whatever her scene is, I can't help but think to myself, that woman has the most beautiful eyes and the most beautiful complexion of anybody I've seen on TV in ages. And I turned to Tamara and said, wow, who is that? And Tamara's like, I don't know. And I said, well, I think she's gorgeous. And of course, then I got the stink eye, of course.
Was it blue-eyed stink eye? Or
it was blue-eyed stink eye. That's right. And so then I made some comment about her acting, so I could,
right. Just to cover.
Right,
yeah.
Right,
oh yeah,
right.
Her performance is outstanding. I don't know where she studied art, but she really followed every lesson.
Oh Lord. Okay.
And that's okay. We have hard lives. We go to the movies for distractions, to be entertained, to be taken out of our humdrum existence. And if there's a gorgeous guy or gal, that's good.
Well, and particularly compared to Ron Perlman. So you put her next to him, who's this scraggly old, kind of ugly guy. I mean, if you don't know who he is, if you saw him, like,
Sons of Anarchy, Beauty and the Beast.
Right, yeah.
Hellboy. By the way, here's a tip. Don't follow him on Twitter.
Oh, really?
He's crazy Trump deranged. Like he is
I've got to go
off his meds.
Okay, I've got to go look then. See, now I have to go look.
He just got a follower.
Okay, one last story I want to get to, because on your website, I saw, this is one of those stories where it kind of flew by me, and because of who it was, I was like, I don't care. But your story about it is fascinating. So at HollywoodandToto.com, Christian has a story, Taylor Swift can't shake off social justice scolds. Tell us.
Well, she has a new video. And, for some reason I keep forgetting the name of the video. I think it's You Need to Calm Down. And it's about gay rights. It's about equal rights. It's about those who would dismiss people who are gay.
Yeah, it is. It's called You Need to Calm Down.
Right. And, I'm on paper for that. I don't I don't want to discourage or treat anyone who is gay differently, and I have no problem with people who are gay. I have no issues. God bless them all. But the video is interesting for a couple of reasons. One is that she shows people who are critical of the gay lifestyle as being crude and dumb and toothless. And I think it's it's a bit of a mean-spirited way to address those who disagree with you. And I think there are people who maybe don't agree with same-sex marriage who may still love gay people and have good hearts and are decent. So I think there's sort of a variety. There are some people on the far whatever who hate gay people, and I have no connection with them at all. I think it's awful. More importantly, the media and the culture has been begging Taylor Swift for quite some time to get political. You can't be apolitical. You're a huge star. You need to use your platform to speak out. And of course, what they mean is to support Hillary Clinton, to support gun control, to support all the issues they care about. Well, she finally relented last year, and she said she's going to be more political. She backed a couple of candidates, and this is part of her mission. So now you'd think the collective left progressive nation would be like, atta girl, we gotcha. I love it. Thank you so much. Your video says, speaks volumes. We're on your side. No.
But why?
Well, the short answer is you can never be woke enough. Because no matter what you do, it's never enough.
Never enough.
So now she was criticized, but this is now what I'm going to cite are left-leaning outlets like The Atlantic. The fact that she's straight and promoting gay rights is problematic.
Oh.
The fact that she may be capitalizing economically on sort of the growing gay rights movement where it's more powerful than before. It's more of an economic engine than it's ever been. So those are two of the things. You can't win. You simply cannot win with progressives. Everything you do is not enough. And just to kind of dial back to a movie we referenced earlier, the movie Booksmart was about two teenage girls who are super woke, super feminist, blah, blah, blah. That movie was attacked by BuzzFeed and one other left-leaning channel because the main characters were white, and that's problematic. And also they seemed middle class to upper middle class, and that was problematic as well. This is the wokest movie in the history of Hollywood. And yet BuzzFeed and one other site, I forget the name of it, said it wasn't enough. So for Taylor Swift, it's not enough.
It's not enough.
Never enough.
Even if you're Taylor Swift. Not
enough.
You can find that on Christian's website, hollywoodandtoto.com. Hey, thanks for coming by this afternoon. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
More of you next week. I have a good feeling we're on a streak.
Oh, no. No. You shouldn't have said that. People are unsubscribing now. It's the view. It's the view. It's the view.
You can't miss it.
All right. Talk to you later. Take care.
Thanks.
All right. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged podcast. A reminder, you can now get us on the iHeart app. So if you've been listening to my radio program on iHeart, you can now find the podcast on iHeart. And of course, you can always subscribe to us on iTunes. And if you do that, if you could leave a 5-star rating, if you could leave us a review, that would be fantastic. And then again, please follow me on Twitter at Michael Brown USA. Follow me on Facebook. It's facebook.com/Michael D. Brown. And if you like the page, please like the page. And then we have a spot there where you can join the internal discussion group. Follow me on Instagram, Michael D. Brown. And help me spread the word of the podcast. It continues to grow, and that is because of you. And I really appreciate each and every one of you that subscribe to the podcast, that you share it, that you let your friends know, you let people know that probably don't agree with what we talk about. Let them know about the podcast too. Anyway, everybody have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you again on Monday.